Ow. Alright guys, today's video. Here's the Z. Here's my workbench. One day, this won't be a workbench anymore because they'll actually have a nice paint job, or at least a 20-foot paint job, because I'm going to drive the cars. I drive my cars and I don't worry about them looking all pretty and that. But anyways, today's video. Subject, Jesus Christ. The absolute most overrated, useless tool you can have in your garage if you work on cars at all. And I'm going to sit here, I'm going to look at this, show you this stuff. The tool, the worthless tool, isn't here. Why is that? Because they all fucking broke. Okay? The worthless tool, most overrated worthless tool, is bolt extractors. And now I know you're going to have a couple people come in here and be like, oh, I've used them before. Oh, they work great. Oh, whatever. First of all, bullshit. Second of all, if you did use it, you used it once and you got lucky and it actually got the bolt out. Everybody else, it's a pain in the ass and they're pretty much useless. Now, bolt extractors, obviously I don't have here. I put a picture of it right there. Essentially what it is it's kind of like a backwards threaded, almost like kind of like reverse of a tap, well, slightly like a tap, but it's not as sharp teeth to cut into metal or whatever, but it goes in there, threads down enough to bite into the bolt and grab, but not to cut new teeth in it. And the theory behind this is that if you have a bolt here, okay, imagine there's a bolt, all right, this bolt is bolted into something, focus, okay, and it's bolted in like this. And I go to take this bolt out. I put a wrench on there, I start applying some torque or whatever, and bolt head snaps off, okay? There's a saying that goes, any 15-minute job is one broken bolt away from being a 3-day ordeal. And that's the truth. Because when bolts break, they are a pain in the ass. It happened on the Z when I first got it. I wanted to change the thermostat to something a little lower, since it came from up north to more of the south where it gets hot as shit, even though I don't drive it in the middle of the day. But I went to take off the gooseneck. One bolt came up perfectly fine, and went to take out the other bolt, snapped the head off. Okay? I made the mistake, and it's happened multiple times, and I thought, you know what, maybe this will be the one time it works, and guess what, it didn't. I tried to use a bolt extractor. So the thing with bolt extractors is, big question. If this bolt right here with this big ass head on it decided that it didn't want to come out with this head that has all this bite, all this purchase with a wrench or a socket or anything like that, the bolt decided it wasn't going to come out with that, why in the hell did the bolt all of a sudden decide, you know what, you put this really small little thing in the center of me, and you know what, I give up, I'm now going to come out? That's a load of shit. What generally happens most of the time is, if you're trying to use a bolt extractor, imagine this here. Imagine a bolt broke off and now this is the top of the head sitting somewhere into whatever's threaded in like this, okay? So you were supposed to take a drill and a drill bit and drill a hole there into the center of various depth or whatever, and then put a bolt extractor, which is much smaller than the bolt, into the bolt, and that somehow is going to let you twist it out. It doesn't work that way. What usually happens is your bolt is broken, you drill it out, you put a bolt extractor in, you try and go extract that out, and then guess what? Your extractor breaks. That's the way it usually always goes. And it's fucking awful, because guess what? The bolt is whatever the bolt is made out of. This one's stainless steel. Some of them, like torque to yield bolts, those are made out of, I don't even know, some shittier version of steel and all that stuff that stretches and all that. But when it comes to a bolt extractor, it's tool steel, which is much harder. So the drill bit you use to try and drill into your bolt that is stuck in whatever it's stuck in, you cannot use now to try and drill out that bolt extractor, because what happens is when the bolt extractor breaks off, you still have to get the bolt out. But now you have a really hard stoppage blockage right in the center of what you're trying to do. So what do you have to do to get that out? Oh, okay. Now I have to go and order, because you can't really find them at stores unless you have like a good store around it, but like Lowe's and Home Depot don't carry them. But I gotta spend an exorbitant amount of money to get 1, possibly 2 carbide drill bits here, just so I can drill out the extractor to then try and continue to get the rest of the bolt out. So the people that will say, oh yeah, the extractor works great, you just got to do blah, 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 blah. They'll try and say, oh, you need to take and drill this bolt out and get an extractor that is really close to the diameter of the shaft in here. Okay? So you have a larger extractor right in here. Okay, that's all well and good. Then my response back to that would be, why don't you just drill the bolt out the rest of the way and tap it? You're still using a drill bit. Why not put, instead of drilling a hole that's the same size as the shaft almost, to put an extractor into, then just twist out the teeth of the bolt, the threads of the bolt. Why not just drill all the way through here? And then, you know what you can get lucky doing maybe, if you drill the bolt out, if you get it nice and centered and drill straight down, is if you get the shaft out, then the teeth, sometimes you can just kind of take a pick or something like that in there, focus, and scrape, and kind of like almost like peeling an onion or something, and peel the teeth out of the threads that are in there. If not, you need to use the extra step of using a tap. So the hole's there, so why waste time trying to put in a bolt extractor that is going to break, that you're going to have to drill out, that you're then going to have to go drill some more to then use the tap just to get the bolt out. It's dumb. Okay? These things are overrated pieces of shit. The only things I would ever attempt to even try and use on a car would be like snap-on ones back when stuff was made in America. Not all the new Chinese-made bullshit snap-on stuff. Like, if you can find older snap-on bolt extractors that were made in America, sure, go ahead and give it a shot. If you try and use a bolt extractor made any other time after that by anyone else, it's going to break on you. I assure you. Now, if we're on the lab truck, if we're on these things and talking about how to get a broken bolt out, I'll give you kind of tips of what to do, or of another way you can do it. You can try, and this for me is like 50-50. And by 50-50, I mean it does actually come out after a given amount of time. But it can take who knows how many different times to actually try it. But you can try and take the broken bolt, if you're lucky, and it breaks like proud of the surface, so the bolt is sticking out. You can try and take a nut or a washer if you need be, and put it around here on that is larger than this bolt here. Take a welder if you have it and weld that nut to the bolt. Sometimes it'll do good. The weld will grab, and it will, the process of actually welding the nut to the bolt kind of heats the bolt up a little bit, that expands the metal around it, which that you can then kind of loosen the threads up a little bit, and it'll want to kind of twist out, but most of the time the bolt and everything you welded on there just kind of snaps off. I've tried it, and it'll say maybe, like, if I'm lucky to get it off, I'll go through 5 or 6 nuts on there maybe. If the bolt is broken off down in the surface like this, and you try to use the welder method, if it's like aluminum, you're all right. If it's like steel and you're trying to weld to a steel bolt or whatever, you're probably going to end up welding up the surface itself there. But you need to take the welder and build the bolt up itself with the wire to bring it up enough to then put try and weld a nut to it and hope that comes out. You can try, if you don't have a welder, or if the welder doesn't work for you, there's a varying degrees of success. That one at least has an option of actually working, unlike a bolt extractor. You can try heat the surface up around it as much as you're comfortable, because depending on where it's located, you can really mess up whatever is the thing you're trying to heat up, the metal or anything that happens to be touching it. If sensors are too close or something like that or whatever, you can cook wires or heat up a sensor too hot and all that stuff. They do have these like coil heat gun things to where it's a magnet. It's an induction thing, so it kind of sits around here. It goes around the bolt and stuff like that, or the area, and it runs a magnetic field through it, which causes heat to focus on what's in the center of it. That can sometimes help heat stuff up and get it to twist out and all that. That's another option. But in my experience, the What you're going to end up having to do is you're still going to end up having to drill out the bolt itself and then re-tap the hole. So as you see, drill bits, taps. I got various drill bits and taps that match all over the place. Like there's a tap for the drill, the bit I ended up using to actually get the broken bolt out of the intake on here. So another thing to kind of keep in mind here is if you do have a broken bolt like this, sometimes that bolt diameter really matters, right? And you're torquing it down. It needs to be in there, the same size, torqued down with the proper thread count and all that stuff. Sometimes you'll be lucky enough and you don't need that bolt that was in there, a new one, to be the same size. And you can actually drill down the center of this bolt and with a smaller bolt or a smaller drill bit and tap that. And then you can get a smaller bolt that fits and then just use the broken off bolt as your new bolt hole that you're bolting down. So like if you have like, say like a, I don't know, like a plastic or metal just timing belt cover or something, which is nothing but really like a dust shield because there's no oil or anything that has to be contained there. They're just kind of bolted on there. They're not really to spec or anything like that. So you can get away if you just do like a smaller bolt, a smaller diameter bolt to fit in that one and tap it in there. It'll still hold it on there just the same. Now, I have espoused this in my other videos multiple times, and this is for dissimilar metals to try and prevent you from even having to deal with broken bolts and drilling and tapping or trying to use an extractor and just screwing yourself up further, or what the welding method. Anti-seize. All right, dissimilar metals, put it on it. If I have a stainless steel bolt or a steel bolt or nickel plated whatever bolt going into aluminum, anti-seize. It doesn't need to be a lot, but what it does is it keeps a little bit of wiggle room in between the threads here and the threads on the whatever it's going into, because when you have dissimilar metals, you have threads that interlock. Can't do it with my fingers like this. They interlock like this, and as whatever's going on, say aluminum, there's the aluminum body or whatever's going into, like a cylinder head, that's heating up and that's expanding at a faster rate than the bolt. The bolt is barely expanding, and then when it cools down, it's contracting and it's kind of pulling and locking in the teeth of the bolt in there. And after all those heat cycles, it can get to a point where they almost fuse together and it doesn't want to come off. That's usually when you have the most broken bolts, aside from a rust issue, is dissimilar metals, where they expand and contract at different rates, and then they just kind of grab and squeeze and hold and don't want to let go. That's where anti-seize comes in, because that keeps, it kind of prevents this whole locking in stuff. It keeps a little bit of a barrier between the threads and the bolt hole. So it allows that even going through all these cycles, it'll still allow you to unthread it. Will this prevent broken bolts all the time? No. But it will prevent it most of the time to help you save you from doing this stuff. So, the most overrated, shitty, don't waste your money on tools unless you can find old, made-in-America Snap-on ones for cheap, are bolt extractors, okay? Invest in a welder, invest in a heat gun, invest in a torch, invest in everything else. Save your money on bolt extractors because they aren't worth the shit. All right? That's all I got for this video. If you disagree with me, like I said, I call bullshit, and you got lucky. And other than that, if you have any other tips of getting out broken bolts that is not a bolt extractor, feel free to share them in the comments. All right, guys. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that stuff, and I will see you next time.